Live Cricket.
Evening, welcome to 5 Live Cricket. With us this evening, Phil Tufnell, Sam Billings and Tamal Mills. Very shortly we'll hear a really candid interview from Managing Director of England Men's Cricket, Rob Key, on where it's gone wrong. We'll talk a little bit more about where it went wrong for England, but mainly look at how they rebuild, where they go in the future, and so on and so forth. We'll also preview the semi-finalists, or this semi-finals rather, for the World Cup. South Africa taking on Australia, India taking on New Zealand. So we will look forward as well, because, Phil, first of all, it is about moving forward, isn't it, really?
Evening, everyone. Evening, chaps. Yes, it is. I think it is. It's got that feel about it, hasn't it? I don't think that they should necessarily sort of like rip up the whole, the whole sort of textbook about it and everything, but it does have that feeling of an end of a cycle, and perhaps that fresh blood, so to speak, should be brought in and then sort of like to refocus on it a little bit. But I don't think it's the end of the world. Listen, England just didn't have a particularly great tournament, but there are definitely lessons to be learned. And I think that also some of the guys are going to there's going to be a few changes. Yeah, absolutely.
You're in the next T20 squad, Tamal. How much do you think that?
Yeah, well done, Tamal.
Yeah, well, yes. How much do you think that squad and atmosphere will be affected by what's happened here?
Evening, guys. Thank you. I don't know, to be honest. As you said, there's going to be ODIs before I get out there, so I'll fly in kind of halfway through. So I won't be there for, I guess, the build-up and those first ODIs. I think 5 or 6 of us will fly in just for the T20s. I think most of the players have been in and around England squads before. Obviously, a decent chunk of them have just been out in India, and obviously there's some guys that are coming in, but there's not many guys, if any, that are going to be... there's a couple of guys that might make debuts, but everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows the environment. The England environment is a good environment. That's never been in question for me. It's been a case of performance, and as I said, we're going to hear what Keezy had to say with regards to the whole tournament and preparation and such. And I'm interested. I don't know. I haven't played for England for 18 months or so. It'll be interesting to see if any little things do change, around training, around the games. But as far as the playing team go, it's just, I think, more of a case of getting guys back in form, or picking guys that you think are going to be in better form. And I think everybody will have that. Everybody's obviously more aware of how of trying to do that bit better, I guess, on the back of how it went out in India.
But if we keep talking about form, which we do, Sam, I mean, it could all change very quickly, couldn't it?
You'd hope so. No, of course, and let's be honest, there's a huge amount of time in between now and those games, so people will have the chance to reflect, kind of refresh, have some time away from cricket, and so I don't think it will be affected. There's a real clarity, certainly, with T being in that squad for the T20 next year, with the World Cup in America and the West Indies next year. There's a huge purpose and view moving forward for that. So there's a new kind of goal on the horizon, and that's the world of cricket at the moment.
Well, you three can put your feet up for the next 8 or 9 minutes here, because this is a really, really interesting interview with Managing Director of England's men's teams, Rob Key, after the team finished 7th in the World Cup table. He spoke to Jonathan Agnew about who is responsible for the poor tournament.
Well, lots of different people, players, management, myself. I mean, when you look at how our preparation into this, it was what it was, really. We had obviously a long summer, and then we went into the games against New Zealand. But right from the start, whether it's Joss Buttler, Matthew Mott, whenever it's been, a question for me about what we're going to focus on here. Is it going to be 50 over? Is it going to be T20? Is it going to be Test cricket? I've always chosen Test cricket. Right the way from the end of the World T20 last year, when it was a choice over Test cricket in Pakistan, who got the best players, I've always the one who said, sorry, Test cricket gets that focus at the moment. Then the same thing in South Africa, when there's a test series going on in New Zealand, I've always chosen test cricket. So really I hold myself to at the top of that list. You know, it's not easy for coaches and captains when you haven't got the ability to plan and have your best team. That's not their fault. So I feel like it's harsh if I turn around and blame the captain and coach when I hold myself accountable for that.
A couple of things surprised me. Interviews before the tournament with senior players, including the captain, starting with the difference between T20 cricket and 50 overs cricket, and how players would cope with that. And on every occasion I asked it, it was kind of battered away, almost as being irrelevant, like, oh, we'll cope, or... Now, that, I think, until perhaps the last couple of games, has been pretty much the way they played.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's times, I think, when we weren't aggressive enough, really, especially in the power play. You know, there's times in which when you watch an England team play, no matter who's bowling at you, they're going to come at you and we're going to set the tone, which is actually what we did in the very last game. In the very last game, on a tough pitch, we actually went out there, and when the option we took was to be aggressive. And as I said at the start, there's times when actually we needed to actually soak up pressure and we went the other way. So I don't think it was just a case of we went one way and that was it. We actually didn't adapt to conditions at all. We're in a place where I think, you know, sometimes 230 is enough and other times 350 is not enough. And you've got to think on your feet quick enough and you've got to be able to adapt. And we didn't do that. And I myself, you know, we started overthinking what we should have been doing. I think if we'd have gone back now, you look at the way that the last couple of games we played, if we won the toss, we had a bat. You know, we didn't know that at the start. We weren't married to a way of going about what was our best way to go about things, you know, and that was due at times to a lot of overthinking, probably due as well. In the perfect world, we'd have come out here and played 50 over cricket way before this competition. So we got used to these conditions because we almost probably felt, right, okay, we've got a good understanding of things here, you know, when the dew comes down, and then it actually becomes easier to bat. But that wasn't the case if you didn't get through to the dew, if you were 6 or 7 down by that time. So I think we underestimated how tough it was going to be reading those conditions, and we got a lot wrong.
What about these contracts, Rob? You come from a dressing room environment. You know how divisive talks of pay and conditions and money and all those things can be. Why were those contracts announced publicly halfway through the tournament? And when did the players first know? When did David Willey first know that he was going to be the only player in this squad, in fact, the only one of 29 players who was not on a contract?
So everyone knew, I reckon, around the 19th. It was before the competition. They all knew. So it was before the Ireland series, actually, that they all sort of knew where they stood. So when they all got on the plane, they knew where it was. I spoke a lot to David Willey at that time, and he clearly wasn't happy, that's right. But I explained to him why we were going in a different direction. The contract system had changed. Things like the incremental contracts that people spoke about, they'd gone actually. We're into development contracts then, you know, and people saying, well, why didn't David Willey get an incremental contract? Well, one, because they're gone, and the other thing, because the people on development contracts are young players that we're hoping are going to go on to be the next thing. Some of those young bowlers are now people we see for the future who are going to go through, and we're starting them off now, who are going to go through. They're going out on the Lions. David Willey's not going to go on the Lions. He's not going to go out there and spend his winters developing his game to become one of the next multi-format bowlers, because we need our bowlers, like other teams have got, who are all-phase bowlers in white ball cricket, who are test bowlers as well, who are running up. You watch the best bowlers in the world in this competition. It's Shami, Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, Rabada. You know, it's some of the best bowlers in the world. So that's what we need to... If England are going to have another great era, it's going to be those guys that take us forward. So that's why we're investing in those guys doing it. Why it was announced at that time. So they all got their offers then. There's then things going backwards and forwards between the lawyers in terms of just the terms of conditions. You know, it's a 108-page document that they're just doing the finer details of that. It's not a negotiation, it's just finishing up the contract. They then, they get the all clear from TEP, they then sign those contracts. So in those, all they had to do was say how many years they wanted. If you'd been offered multi-year deals, and you know how the media landscape works. So in the middle of the tournament, everyone signed their contract. I made the decision then, right, Ben Stokes, the England Test captain, has said he only wants a 1-year deal. Now, since I've started this job, every single thing ends up in the media. When I offered 26 contracts to everyone on the 20th or the 19th, that evening, every single one is in the Telegraph. Players have agents, all these kinds of things. There's links everywhere, as you know. So my decision really was that we're just going to get in front of this, be as transparent as we can, and we're going to actually explain what has happened with contracts and why. That's why we did it. The thought that, you know, it's never an easy job, this, at times, from the decisions you have to make. So people were saying, well, why don't we just put them off? So that would have meant, so the contract cycle starts on October the 1st. They all get paid on October the 20th. Had we not done that, we'd have been losing in this World Cup, and the story would have been no player's been offered a contract, no player knows his future, no player knows what he's done. So they're the decisions you make. You also listen to every player basically say, we all knew what happens, we don't feel it was a distraction. Things like, oh, it creates a hierarchy. There's been a hierarchy. We're hierarchical beings. There's hierarchy in everything. There'll be a hierarchy at the BBC. It's just the way we live. There's a hierarchy in every industry. Every family has a hierarchy. Every central contractor's had a hierarchy, from the Ben Stokes and the people who get paid up the top to the people down the bottom. So there's been a lot said. There's been a lot of narrative being used with this that, one, hasn't come from us, and also I don't think has been relevant at all, to be honest.
Do you think the board has been rather bullied into these contracts? I'm looking at some of the 3-year deals. Looks like a good deal to me. Crikey. Well, how many games is Mark Wood going to play in 3 years, for instance? And when's Matthew Potts going to play his first game? I mean, there seem to be some pretty generous deals around there.
Yeah, but you've got to remember it's a different landscape now. So not only the thing I like about it, so it's not only about what you're doing for England, it's our best cricketers are now attached to England. You know, our summer is so important. So now anyone on those central contracts, you're not going to go and be able to play in America. You're not going to be able to go and play in the CPL. You're not going to be able to go and enhance other competitions in our summer around the world. You are committing to English cricket. So it's not just about, the days have changed where it's just like, right, well, he's not playing for England. It's not about that anymore. It's about, actually, Matt Potts is going to be doing stuff out in the UAE. So at some stage he will come good, and we're hoping that he's going to become one of the guys, because we're going to need a battery of fast bowlers, that he's going to take us forward. And that's the thing with these contracts, and they're on completely different values as well. Not everyone is getting the same amount of money right at the top. Some of them are right down the bottom of that. People like Rayan Ahmed, who are very much at the start of their journey, we now control what you're going to do. It's like, no, you're not going to go off and play in every franchise whenever you want, do whatever you want. You're going to go to the UAE, to the Lions, because we want you potentially for a test tour in India, so we're going to start preparing you for that. You know, and that's not what the David Willies and people of this world are going to want to do. So that's why these guys are getting contracts. And again, they're all at very different levels. So I think it's one of the best things. I think we now have 29, because there's 3 development contracts, you know, of our best players committed. We've actually turned around to the player and said, come on then, what do you want to do now then? And they've committed to English cricket. I think that's a great thing. That's a much better thing than other countries that are losing players. You know, I've watched Quinton de Kock out here. He's one of the best players. You know, I love watching Quinton de Kock bat, you know, hopefully not against us, doing really well. He's not playing Test cricket anymore in South Africa. I think that is such a shame. And we in England are not at that point yet, and long may that continue.
So players like Root, Stokes, and you can list off those senior players with a World Cup in 4 years' time. You're not going to draw a line under them now and look to build for that. No,
I don't ever see a time where actually, especially for people at 33, 34, you would know Graham Gooch was probably his best years were 30 to 40. I don't see a time where you ever have to turn around and make definite answers to anything. When you turn and say, no. You know, everyone seems to want to go, right, they're done, bang, get rid of them. They're done, bang, get rid of them. No. If they're the best players and they, in 4 years' time, they're going to be the best players, then they can play. But at the moment, other people are getting an opportunity like they did a few years ago, and we got such exciting talent to go out there and become the next great England team in white ball cricket, which, bar 5 weeks, which completely come at the wrong time, we've been, and we need to get back there pretty quickly.
Rob Key, Managing Director of England Men's Cricket, with Jonathan Agnew. The full interview is on the TMS podcast on BBC Sounds. He'd be a terrible politician, wouldn't he, Phil? Because he answers every question.
Yeah.
I mean, he answers every question and gives you detail. I mean, it's so refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what Keezy does do. That's what he has done.
You know where,
and I think that's
where we stand. We know where we stand. He's answered everything there and given a thought process behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, that's what he brings, speaks very well. And you feel that it's moving in the right direction when he sort of like says something, which is fantastic. The things that I didn't particularly agree with there when he came out with was that he's looked at it and he said that we didn't need to adapt. And we didn't know what was the best way of going about things. I mean, you rattle on about contracts and this, that, and the other and stuff. You know what I mean? But then to come out and say that, I find a little bit worrying. I mean, crikey O'Reilly, that they've got some of the best heads working, about pitches and about teams and about how we're going to play and all this details and all this sort of like stats and what have you. But he still said there, we didn't really know what was the best way of going about things.
And also, there was an element of that. Bearing in mind, Sam, what we have talked about on this show over the past month, with you and Tamal in particular, about playing out in India, knowing conditions. This is a squad that has a lot of IPL experience in it within that England squad. I have to say, that was the one bit where I thought, really? You know how it's going to behave at certain grounds in certain conditions? That, given the experience within the IPL, does slightly surprise me.
Yeah, I think what I got out of that was actually that Kesey acknowledged that we haven't been good enough as a squad to do that during the tournament, and was very upfront and honest about it, that the players haven't been good enough and it's been under par, and he kind of shoulders the responsibility. Like you said, incredibly refreshing, and it's very hard to argue with anything he said there.
Does it help head coach and captain that he has gone, it's on me? I haven't helped them prepare well enough because I was focusing on Test. I made Test cricket the priority.
Certainly a little bit, of course it does, and I think it is. It's been brilliant. I'm a huge fan of Kesey. I've known him a very long time, and that's exactly how he's always been. Certainly as a captain throughout, but the clarity and the honesty is always something that you'll get from him. And as a captain and a coach, yes, of course they'll take that, but they'll also be disappointed and know that they could have done themselves. They could have done more themselves as a squad. So yeah, it's not all on Kesey. It's a group effort, but it certainly helps when the top guy does shoulder most of the responsibility.
No, absolutely. But it always, I don't really quite still understand, and I wonder whether you two boys can, as you say, still playing and still doing it or whatever. But when they say that we're not focused enough, we put too much emphasis on Test cricket, how does that sort of filter down? I've heard this a lot, what does that actually mean? What, people don't bother about doing the stats, people don't bother about this. I mean, we lost our focus. It has to be either Test cricket or one-day cricket. I don't understand it. Can you help?
I assume they're just relating to in, say, the year or 2 year cycle leading up to a competition, not having the opportunity to string together a run of games with a smaller squad where you get the rhythm of playing together and such. When, as Kesey was saying, they're choosing, or they have done for this last little period, to prioritise Test cricket, and We've spoken, as Chapper said, a lot over the month about different things that have gone on and the preparation for this tournament. But you do, I guess, have to look at it as a bigger picture over the last year or 18 months or 2 years. How much 50-over cricket this team has played, and it obviously hasn't been a lot. And that's something that they keep to kind of seem to going back to, and Kesey alluded to himself.
The other element to kind of put into this is that as England players, or as an England team, we play more cricket than anyone else in the world. That is just a fact. And trying to balance the workloads, and I know it gets thrown about a lot, but balancing the workloads of every single player, having people like Joe Root primed, ready to go throughout the calendar year, with everything else that's going on in the world at the moment in terms of opportunities to players. He went to the IPL for the first time this year. He went to the ILT20 for the first time this year. So even a man of Joe Root's class, his experience, the schedule catches up with everyone, and no one's immune to it as it's been shown. So I think that's what he's probably alluding to is no one player can play all three formats consistently now, the way cricket is around the world. Look at the 2 years where Virat Kohli didn't score 100 for 2 or 3 years. It was exactly the same kind of thing. No one is immune to that issue. in my opinion.
So focusing and sort of refocusing is scheduling, really.
You've got no control over that, though, have you? Really?
No, the TV deal kind of tells us where to play, doesn't it?
No, but actually, what he is saying, Rob Key, is that the way they have done these contracts does give them some kind of control over the schedule. Now, maybe not everything, but now I thought his answer on the contracts, when you actually take a step back, probably makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Tamal? Really, Rehan Ahmed, we are thinking, right, we've got a test tour to India, right? We want you to maybe ready for that. So UAE with the Lions, but we need to be able to control that so that you don't go off to God knows, I have no idea what might be on at that point. Something somewhere. So you can see what they are trying to do with then on top of that trying to make sure that these superstars of English cricket are going to be able to be seen by the kids in this country during our own summer.
Yeah, look, I've never had a central contract. I never will. And
makes two of us, old boy.
and me.
From what
and me, actually, just for the full house, yeah.
Oh, there we go. We're well qualified, aren't we?
But they're an impossible. From what I understand, they're an impossible task to. There's no right answer. There's always going to be some portion of players or whoever looking outwards that are unhappy. So yeah, it looks like they've tried their best to get as much control over as many players as they can within reason. And yeah, as was alluded to in the interview, maybe you've had to sweeten the pot a bit more for some players to get them to commit. Go on.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, you made your point about the central contracts, and actually Rob Key there actually gave more details about the bowling than anything else when it comes to the contracts. And they are looking at trying to have a group of bowlers who are there for all formats. That's basically what he said there, isn't he? And cited Shami and Hazelwood and Cummins and Rabada and various others. So for someone like you and your body and your fitness and the white ball, which is where you have gone for those reasons, is it viable to have a group of fast bowlers who can do all, or do they need to be a bit more flexible in horses for courses?
I think in a perfect world, yeah, you want players that are available in all formats. I'm obviously only ever available for one format, and as such, I'm never going to be considered for a central contract, and that's completely fine. And I'm obviously one of the few players now that are playing for England without a central contract. You got kind of Phil Salt, Will Jacks there in both of these white ball squads. They miss out on central contracts, but there isn't really any schedule clash at the moment. It obviously came to a pass this year when a group of us made ourselves unavailable for the Bangladesh tour due to a clash with the PSL, because obviously we weren't, Sam included, we weren't centrally contracted, and we could earn a lot more money going to the PSL than playing for England. Hopefully there isn't going to be too many more of those clashes with the way the schedule is at the moment, because there's a test series in the new year, and then there's no England cricket until our home summer. They're obviously got an eye on America and how that's growing, and they want to, as Keezy said, and rightly so, really protect the English summer. They're obviously very aware of that potential growth coming from America.
That's the one, isn't it? I sense that might be the one that they're really worried about.
Yeah, as you rightly said, he wants to protect the English summer, and it is huge. And yeah, if a player misses a tour to country X in January, not ideal, but okay. But you want to make sure that from between the months of May, June, July, August, September, you've got your main players playing in your main competitions and for England as much as you can, and rightly so.
Some sort of control, isn't it? That's what was coming through. She said that you've got to try and get control of the England players somehow, and that's what they're trying to do, which is right. As you said, I kind of agree with everything he says there, Keezy.
Because others, Phil, have said, I wonder if they've been panicked or spooked by say the American franchise tournament and others, and have gone a bit the other way. But if that's what they've had to do to feel like they've protected themselves, then maybe you just have to accept that risk.
Absolutely. And he also mentioned there Quinton de Kock, didn't he? He said that, it's an absolute, shame. He loves watching Quinton de Kock, you know what I mean? But so that they're trying to just kind of ring fence those England players so that they can then work with them, and this word perhaps again, focus on where they want to be playing and what competitions they want to be playing in to get this sort of lead up to World Cups and what have you, because it seems to me at the moment it's just sort of like, crikey, can anyone turn up?
Going back to actual squads, Sam. I mean, this ODI squad for the West Indies has got 6 from the World Cup in it. Then some who are uncapped at ODI level, such as Josh Tongue and John Turner and Ollie Pope. And then people like Salt and Jacks and Duckett. You came in to the first ODI series, didn't you, after the 2015 World Cup, when again it was a reset. From your experience, what did a reset look like back then? Because I'm kind of thinking it was a bit different back then. But what does reset mean?
Yeah, well, it was the definition of, in terms of it was a clean slate, and Morgs took it on and was like, right, we're going to play in this way. And we're actually, I mean, back in the day, it was very much the best 11 players, regardless of format, we're going to play in every single game for England. So Sir Alistair Cook is a really good example, a very fine one-day player, but didn't necessarily kind of fit the mould in which Morgs wanted to take. So all of a sudden, it was picking the right kind of players to fit that mould with the team identity as a real kind of core value. And I mean, you saw the results straight away, and it just kind of gathered momentum over a very quick period of time, and kind of the results speak for themselves. But I look at it now. You look at those young players. Will Jacks is one that stands out. Phil Salt isn't that young, but hasn't played as much cricket as probably that he deserves to play. 2 really explosive players that are kind of like that Alex Hales, Jason Roy partnership that back in yesteryear kind of went off with a bang. So I think they're 2 guys that really I'm looking forward to seeing play a lot more in an England shirt and have a huge potential.
Yeah, I mean that was a huge reset, wasn't it? I mean, you could see it. We were sort of like leaving balls and things like that. I mean, it was a huge sort of different way to play one-day cricket, what we'd got left behind from, hadn't it? And the other thing that old Aggers said there as well, it was about the difference between the 20-over game and the 50-over game, and he kept asking it, didn't he? And he kept just going, we'll cope. I think that they did struggle a lot with that. I think that they did perhaps think it's just sort of like 2 games of T20 instead of sort of like, think about how the 50-over game is really played. And I don't know where you lay that sort of not blame, but sort of, if you know what I mean. Where do you lay that? Is that with the coaching? Is that with, perhaps the captain not getting his message across? I think that's sort of... It seemed that it was a bit too flippant. They were sort of flippant in the way they played 50-over cricket, if you know what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, I think Kesey's job is there to set up the structure and give everything possible to the coach and captain. And then in terms of game plan and implementing that, it certainly in the environment I was in, Morgs was the biggest driver of that. He was so clear, and as T will also add, that his clarity and conviction really of saying, no, this is how we're going to play, and that's it was so striking and so clear for every single player to go and do. So I think Kesey has done and admitted where the players' availability and things like that are on him, but certainly from a mindset and how you adapt, that's far more on the ground and within the dressing room, senior players as well, being able to adapt. That's far more a day-to-day thing, which is down to you as a player really to adjust. And as we've said numerous times, India is a place where you cannot just play in one gear. They've played fantastically well. They've absorbed pressure, and Kesey admitted that when we've needed to absorb pressure, we haven't done that to then put it back on. And I think everything he said in that interview is absolutely spot on, to be honest.
Tamal, final.
Yeah, I think just responding on to what you said with regards to Morgs, and I think from my experience, it's slightly different as a batter as opposed to a bowler. It's very different. You bat as a unit, whereas you bowl as a bit more as an individual. I think sometimes. So I knew, and it's always nice going into a team where you know what your role is. So I'm thinking to the 2021 World Cup in the UAE, when I came back into the side, it was you're probably going to bowl one in the power play, one in the middle, and then I trust you to go about your business and do what you do at the death. And that's the type of messaging that goes a long way, but you sometimes don't always get. So as a player, that's always nice to receive.
You talk about how the game's changed. And there's an article in the Telegraph over the weekend about England's worst World Cup campaigns, right? And they go back. If you're a younger listener, I mean, this will astonish you, right? In 1999, England failed to get out into the Super Sixers because of run rate. That's how they got out of the group, because India were in that group and South Africa were in that group. So England. Bearing in mind it went down to run rate, in that group they took 46.5 overs to chase down 204 against Sri Lanka, right? They took 39 overs to chase down Kenya's 203 and 38.3 overs to chase down Zimbabwe's 167. But then this is the bit that made me really laugh. Nasser opened against Zimbabwe, right? And he took 93 balls spanning 40 overs to score 57 not out.
Listen, it was needed. It must have been needed. It must have been needed.
And England took 5 overs to knock off the 9 runs in that game. With Neil Fairbrother, who was a fantastic one-day batsman. He was a fantastic batsman anyhow. But Neil Fairbrother needed 23 balls to score 7. It was like, I mean, it's like, well, it was another game, wasn't it, Sam? I mean, that
must have been doing a bit.
Yeah, 57 not out in 40 overs.
Tough was to start justifying it and saying, "Oh, we needed a bit of that in India." That's the thing, Tuffers. You'd be like, "That's a bit of what we needed." They got out the group. Oh. Just about. I mean, what was it? 160 and 38 overs. What were they doing?
Yeah, I know. It was just that Nasser Hussain, 57 not out of 93 balls, spanning 40 overs. Right,
I'm surprised he didn't run a few out either.
Back to the current day. We'll look ahead to the semi-finals. Ball by ball commentary of both matches on TMS this week. First semi-final is on Wednesday. India taking on New Zealand in Mumbai. India won 9 from 9 in the group stage. New Zealand lost 4 of their group matches. So obviously the home side will be big favourites. Let's bring in New Zealand cricket broadcaster Brian Waddle. Evening, Brian.
Good evening or good morning from over here. You didn't want to talk about the England World Cup game in New Zealand in 2015, did you?
No. We don't need to. We don't. We can. We've moved on from England, Brian. Let's concentrate on the modern day. How can they beat India in India?
Well, it's going to be a tough task. There's no doubt about that. When you look at what India have done in the games leading up to and the performances of, more than one individual right through their top batting order. They've got, 500 runs scored by 400. But New Zealand have got a batting lineup I think that they can be pretty happy with at the moment. I think what they're going to have to be able to do is improve on. They've got to be able to create some pressure with the ball, take early wickets, and see if India are able to respond. If you remember back to the pool game that they played, it was a pretty close one. I think India always had it under control, but they had to work through to the 48th, 49th over to get the 270-odd after Daryl Mitchell had scored 130 for New Zealand. So there is some hope there, even though you have to look at it and say with your head that India are the favourites. With my heart, I like to think a little bit more of New Zealand than that.
Brian Tuffers here, mate. How did you think you'd get through to the semi-final? And did New Zealand as a sort of country have confidence in this side?
Yes, I think they had that confidence, and we did believe we were able to do it. The surprise, of course, was beating England in the first game. We looked at the first 4 games, and you sort of said, well, we'll get 3 out of 4 there, and we should be able to do the job down the order to get a couple. I think they worked on the basis that 5 wins would be enough. Well, it was just, and there's always been that confidence that New Zealand would be able to deliver, as they've done in World Cups since 2003 was the last time I think that they'd missed out on a semi-final. So there's always been that air of confidence. Coming up against India in a semi-final, yep, we beat them in Manchester at the last World Cup, a game that lasted 2 days, and you've got to draw on all those positives, I guess.
And Brian, what about fitness? They're a bit walking wounded, aren't they, New Zealand? They've had quite a few players in and out of the side. Are they shaping up to be okay for the big game?
Yeah, I think they've got through the injury problems, and they're in a situation now where they could have a full fit 15. I think there's 12 basically that will play in this game. The one person they will miss because he was a key part of the last World Cup is Matt Henry, but he's been replaced in the squad, and while the player who replaced him hasn't played yet, the likelihood of Jonathan playing is pretty slim. They've got to get the best out of what they've got, and there's only 2 games to go.
We talked about tosses and conditions, didn't we, earlier, Sam? And is there a danger for this one that the toss is going to have a lot of importance on it? The first innings score at the Wankhede is 357, and look, we've been in this situation many times before, where games can be decided at the toss. You don't want that.
No, of course you don't, and the danger is obviously Mumbai is a batter's paradise at times, so that they could look at that as a real positive, get a score on the board, and it increases New Zealand's chances hugely. Don't forget, you've got 1.4 billion people with the pressure in knockout cricket on India. That can work both ways, positively and negatively.
Would you be saying that if you were in the New Zealand dressing room? I mean, would you? I'm not saying it is a cliche, but we often use it. The pressure's all on them.
Oh, you've got to use it, haven't you?
Yeah,
of course. Yeah. You got to try and think that way. And certainly is funny, especially knockout cricket is completely different to pool stage cricket, where every single over, every single event has such huge ramifications. So, it's the kind of game where one guy steps up and can really win a game on their own. So I'd be going in with that mindset, certainly from a New Zealand point of view.
That's the thing, isn't it, Tamal? I think what we've seen in this World Cup, and I know they've won every game, but the moments when they have lost a wicket or they have slightly struggled, I mean, it is silent. So that's your other part of your team talk. The pressure's all on them. Let's silence the crowd. Yeah,
100%. A lot of these New Zealand players played against India. It was at Old Trafford, wasn't it? That 2019 World Cup when New Zealand beat India. I'm sure nobody fancied New Zealand that day either. That run out from Martin Guptill, MS Dhoni, and New Zealand go on to the final. So a lot of those players were there in 2019 and have come back. So it's not like they're going into a game facing a team that they've never beaten and beats has the wood over them. So I'm sure that they're a very experienced squad. They're one of the older squads, New Zealand. They're not they're not kind of the plucky upstart team that have made their way into the semi-final. By fortune. They've got a lot of good players, a lot of very experienced players, and it's a lot of IPL players. They're not going to be going into that game nervous. They're not going to be going into that game daunted. They'll just know that they're coming up against a very, very good team, and if they're going to win, they're going to have to be at their very best and hope that a few of the Indian players have a bad day.
That experience, Brian, that's the key, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely. And now that they've got a fit Kane Williamson back, of course, the control that he has over the side, the common sense, the ability to be patient and settle will just lead them to where they would want to be. And it will give them some point of being able to prepare themselves. You talked about the IPL, of course. There was a time when New Zealand went to India and couldn't bat to save themselves in matches over there. Well, of course, now more than half the squad plays in the IPL, plays short-form cricket, understands the crowd noise in the background, and that experience factor in the IPL and within this side is going to be an important part, because their records at this tournament have proven that as well.
Yeah, just a quick one on Rachin Ravindra. For me, has been pretty much the find of the tournament. What a player! I mean, it's been a bit of a surprise from my point of view, I'll be honest. But back in New Zealand, did everyone know how good a player he was?
Yes, I think everybody who has been around cricket knew how good he was. I think the expectation was it would take a little bit longer for him to come to the fore. He's been playing the age group cricket, and he's been playing for Wellington for a number of years, and he's had irregular success. He's batted with Devon Conway, and they have developed a good partnership through the Wellington team, and I think that's helped Ravindra. And to see him come out and bat the way he has done, and to me the most significant part is that he's taken down some very, very good bowling attacks in doing that. And you see him, the top run scorer. It was a bit of a surprise for New Zealand, and of course he was up there with the leading players for a while there. 565 runs, it's going to be a big couple of days if they get to the final for somebody like Rachin Ravindra.
And he's going to get a massive deal in the IPL come December when the auction runs around as well. It's a tale as old as time. I've benefited from it myself. Do well in India against India, you get rewarded. So that's my claim for the IPL auction in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say there speaks a man without a central contract. Brian, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Brian Waddle, New Zealand cricket broadcaster. So that's the first semi-final. The other semi-final in Kolkata on Thursday. South Africa against Australia. Australia 5 times winners. South Africa looking to make a World Cup final in any format for the first time. Here's Mitchell Stark on where this one will be won and lost.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The toss of the coin is obviously plays a part. It's not the be-all and end-all. We've won some games chasing this tournament, which is a big tick. They've certainly had their, like everyone, they've had challenges chasing at night time here in India. We certainly have as well. We haven't been to Calcutta yet this tournament, so we'll get our first look tonight to have a first assessment of the square and the ground. But yeah, I think it's pretty even keel. I mean, you could say the same if they put us under pressure, then in the same ballpark. So if we end up bowling first, we need to be mindful of that and have a plan of attack if the wicket doesn't quite suit that. Likewise, if we get to bowl second, whether dew comes into play. So as we stand here 2 days out or whatever it is, we'll come up with some assessments and the opposition and the ground and the conditions and go from there.
What word, Phil, is it going to be impossible to avoid in this discussion about South Africa in a World Cup semi-final?
Excuse me, I don't know.
Oh.
No, choking.
Yeah.
I just choked there, chappers. Did it not come through on the microphone?
No, it's a very good piece of acting, Philip.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an absolute crackerjack. 2 fantastic teams who have sort of, as you say, had their ups and downs in this tournament. And I think that Australia might pip it for me, and I think that's because of we saw like that amazing knock from Glenn Maxwell against Afghanistan. I mean, that was just I don't think you'll ever see something like that ever again in cricket, but never say never. But to get over the line in some of those occasions, and they've come in a little bit under the radar, Australia, for an Australia side, that's quite rare. They're always right up the top, top of the tree usually. So I just think that the way that they've won games when they haven't, pulled themselves out of some holes when they haven't. The likes of Davey Warner getting off and running with the bat and things like that. I think that they're just going to pip them. But that South African top 6 is a serious top 6 as well.
What about Tamal Mitchell-Stark's point there that they actually haven't been to... I thought everybody had been everywhere in this tournament, I'll be honest with you. But he said they haven't been to Calcutta yet in this tournament. Is that a big issue?
It could go both ways, couldn't it? It means you could be arriving somewhere fresh, no demons. Obviously, if you'd gone to a place earlier in the tournament and played terribly there and got beaten badly, you may be going there with a little bit of baggage. But likewise, if you'd gone there and gone really well, then you go there with good memories, don't you? Everybody has favourite grounds, and individually, that's not just as a team, as an individual as well. So, I think ideally you might have liked to have played a group game there. I think as a bowler, you got a feel for the ends. From bowling both ends and things like that, so you maybe just slightly a few less things to do pre-game in your preparation. But as Tough has said, this Australian team they're playing very good cricket. They're very confident. I think I agree with Phil. I think they definitely were underestimated going into the tournament and have overperformed to where, I'm sure not themselves, but what most people from the outside have thought. I think Adam Zampa's been outstanding, considering that they came into the tournament. They've come into a World Cup in India with only one spinner, really, as in a frontline spinner. And there's been a lot of pressure on him to perform, and he's done that, being one of the leading wicket takers in the whole competition. And then with the bat, they just seem to have every game they'll have a player score 100 pretty much, and that means you've always got a good score on the board. So they're in a great place.
It is great having both you and Sam here, because we get a bowler and a batter's perspective on virtually any subject. If you were now in that South African bowling attack, and you have the ball in your hand and Glenn Maxwell comes in, look, everybody knows the brilliance of Maxwell anyhow, but after seeing him do what he did against Afghanistan, which is, as Phil says, highly unlikely we'll ever see anything like that again, do you think that changes your psychology, your mentality as the bowler when he comes in?
You hope not. I think if you're a coach or a captain and you've got a group of bowlers that are maybe that way inclined, then that's not a great place to be. So you've got to instill that confidence and that belief early. You've got to make sure before you go over that white line, you make sure everybody's really on and they're up for a fight, and you identify those key moments in games. Say you're in the ball in the field, you take a wicket, maybe you get the lads together and you really drive home the point of, okay, we need to
get him out.
or put our foot on them here, or whatever it might be, because it's a World Cup semi-final. It's a huge game. But South Africa have played brilliantly throughout the competition as well. They will come into it with a lot of confidence. They themselves, they're missing arguably one of their best bowlers. Amrit Nortje hasn't even been in the whole competition at all. So they've had other guys, Marco Jansen and Coetzee, they've stepped up really, really well. So look, there's two good teams, two evenly matched teams coming in good form, and I just hope for the sake of the tournament and the neutral that it's a good game.
So, as a bowler myself, chappers, if a bloke just goes out and gets 210 or whatever he did, I'm then thinking to myself, well, he ain't going to do that again.
Chances are.
It's exactly the right mentality, Phil. When you're watching that, Sam, what are you thinking?
Wow. Seriously, that is as good a knock as you'll ever see. And I think... Are you thinking how is he managing to do this? No, not necessarily, because I think we've seen it in parts where he's done it before. Obviously, to that level and that consistency whilst cramping up, I mean, it is pretty incredible. But I think you just see, certainly I'm biased, obviously I'm going to get a grumpy fast bowler looking at me now, but I think the progression of batting has probably gone at a faster rate than bowling has in probably the last 20 years, might be fair to say. And you just see players just keep taking to another level, certainly with the bat. And Maxwell has always been one of those players. He's been at the forefront of being kind of a pioneer of white ball cricket. Josh Butler's another one. And there's only a certain handful of players in world cricket can do what he did the other day. And I think he said in an interview afterwards, it wasn't chanceless. He had a bit of luck, and then he just took it. And it was one of those days where everyone has them in their career, some people more than others, but you're not even thinking, it's all a blur and everything just clicks. It truly is incredible.
Yeah, cricket's a game like no other in terms of after Maxwell got dropped, he got dropped by Mujeeb, an absolute dolly at short fine leg, and I was watching it, had it on, and it was almost from a long way out. I knew, well, not knew, but I was very confident that Australia were going to win that game. And you can sometimes, when games of cricket, Sam and I have been involved in many, especially in T20 and short form cricket, you just can't stop them. And you try and you dig deep and you try and formulate all the plans. And I didn't have for a second believe that Afghanistan were going to do anything to win that game. And every time, you obviously we're watching on TV, and every time the ball came off the bat, you weren't thinking, okay, oh yeah, that might get caught on the fence. You think, no, that's another 6, or that's in the gap, that's another 4. And and there's obviously there's that word momentum, and you argue, is it real or not? But you can't argue with it sometimes, and they've got a lot of players in great form.
Yeah, I think that it's only really sort of Glenn Maxwell really could have played that knock, and perhaps a Josh Buttler, because as you say, when he was cramping up, all he was doing was using his forearms and his wrists, wasn't he?
A bloke called Ben Stokes might have something to say about that as well.
Well, no, it's all right, okay, on Ben Stokes then, but there's not a lot of other, perhaps.
Handful,
but it's. He didn't sort of, and his game isn't about sort of using his legs in a funny sort of way. He's the reverses, isn't he? He's the scoops and all of this kind of stuff. So, I don't think there would have been too many people. I mean, he's got arms like Popeye anyway, and forearms like Poppy. I don't think there's too many of us who could play them shots and keep pinging them onto the boundary, you know what I mean? So, it was kind of set up wonderfully for him, but I mean, they say that about, players with injuries, but I mean, at one stage, he was lying flat on the floor, sort of shuddering like that, on like a full body spasm, and then got up and just sort of flicked one over mid-wicket. I mean, I watched it, and as I said, my mouth was just open. I mean, they were par 3s, some of them, for me. You know what I mean? I couldn't hit it like that, even if I tried, let alone when I was cramping up.
Your mind as a bowling attack must just get more and more scrambled, Tamal, in that situation.
It can do, and that's where you need experience. And let's be honest, South Africa have a much better bowling attack than what Afghanistan did for that particular circumstance. And look, that was a night at the Wankhede on a good pitch. Dew was coming in. Afghanistan mainly had spin bowlers in their lineup. Everything is different. This is Kolkata, Eden Gardens. You hope it's a good pitch. That pitch that England played on there the other day was pretty slow there and didn't carry that first innings. But in the IPL, the last couple of years, it's actually been it's been pretty quick at Eden Gardens. So hopefully there's a good pitch, and it offers something for the fast bowlers as well. So it's a tough place to go, and that's where you need good leadership, and you need individuals to stand up and to try and stop moments in games, or they do turn pretty ugly.
So on Sunday, the Men's World Cup final will be between Sam,
India and Australia.
Phil,
India and Australia, with Australia a chance to win.
All right, good. He went further with your prediction.
Yeah.
Tamal?
Let's go New Zealand, South Africa.
Yeah. Why not? That's why you're here, Tamal. That's why you're here.